Hello and welcome to the magical world of the Pensieve. Quick, what's the biggest plot hole in Harry Potter that you can think of? Well, chances are you said the time travel from The Prisoner of Azkaban. Almost every video or review that points out the flaws of Harry Potter in any capacity say that this is the biggest flaw in all of Potterdom. And this is for good reason, of course. The time travel is a complicated subject, especially because it doesn't exist, and probably never will exist because future people aren't wandering around our present-day society. Time travel uses a lot of complex rules just to make logical sense, and even in the movies Back to the Future or Terminator that focus solely on time travel, they don't seem to follow the rules correctly. However, Harry Potter is not a movie or book that gets time travel wrong, generally speaking. Before I get into the nitty-gritty explanations, please note that as a human person, I am capable of being flawed, and while I've researched a lot into this, I can still have made a lot of mistakes with this issue. If you think that's the case, let me have it down in the comments. If you've seen as many Harry Potter videos as I have, you'll have heard the common phrasing, "Why don't they use the time turner to solve their problems? Why don't they go back in time and kill Voldemort before he was powerful?" Heck, even even the How It Should Have Ended series says this is something that should have been done. This would never work because the time turner in the Harry Potter series follows certain rules that wouldn't allow for that. For one, the time turner was revealed in Pottermore, an old version at least, to have a limit of only a few hours. But more important than that little excuse, it is a different type of time travel altogether. I'll go more into this later, but the time turner uses Predestination timeline time travel. If you want to go back and kill Voldemort, you would need to use an altered timeline time travel, which is very different. In fact, not only is going to kill Voldemort different, it creates a paradox. A paradox, for those of you who don't know, is a concept that seems to make sense, like going back in time, killing Voldemort, preventing bad things, but then it has a flaw in logic or is self-contradictory. The paradox here is called the grandfather paradox. In the grandfather paradox, if you went back in time and killed your grandfather, then your father would never be born, and then you in turn would not be born. But that creates the problem that you never went back in time in the first place to kill your grandfather. So who did it? Obviously, this doesn't make sense, it's a paradox. If Harry went back in time and killed Riddle before he knew about magic, then the future would have no Voldemort. If there's no Voldemort in the future, there's no reason for Harry to go back and stop him before he knows magic. So now we've established that using the time turner to kill Voldemort is a paradox. Now we can move on to how the time turner is free of that flaw. If killing Voldemort uses the altered timeline theory of time travel, the time turner in the series uses the predetermined timeline. This is also known as a causal loop or retrocausality, which is generally speaking paradox-free. A predetermined timeline theory is a bit hard to fully explain, so buckle in for the wild ride of explanation time. Put simply, a predetermined timeline is a timeline that does not branch off of itself and doesn't get altered anyway by the time travel. If you use a time turner, you go back and experience the same portion of time for a second time. However, when you go back in time, you cannot alter the past because the past was altered all along. Confused yet? Let me explain it with a really clever example from the Harry Potter movie itself. Before time travel is even mentioned in the movie, a really fancy rock is thrown in a jar that has the sole purpose of holding sand. At the time, neither the characters nor the audience know where it came from. It just caught their attention so they could notice the Minister of Magic coming from the castle. Later on in the movie, future Hermione throws the rock at her past self so that they can notice the Minister. This shows the viewer that even when Harry was experiencing the evening for the first time, his future self was always there doing something else out of sight. That way, when Harry goes to the past, he's not doing anything new, just stuff that he's already done before. Future Harry is working behind the scenes the whole time. In this little diagram you see here, you can see that future Harry and past Harry were both on the grounds at the same time doing different things. There was never an instance in that night where future Harry was not making alterations to the story. Most people are convinced that Buckbeak was killed on the first time through the night, and that Harry changed events and saved Buckbeak by time traveling. This actually isn't the case. On the first time through the night, Harry, Ron, and Hermione, and the audience, don't see Buckbeak die, but they assume he died. And you know what happens when you assume? This is what actually happened when you heard the thunk and saw the bird fly away. That's right, Buckbeak never died, not at any point in the movie. The only difference is that you saw it from a different perspective. In fact, that's why you can find videos here on YouTube that show both experiences at the same time. But the biggest thing people tend to get hung up on about this theory is the question, what would happen to Harry if he decided to change the events of the past instead of trying to keep them the same? In the movie, Harry tries to keep things the same when he goes to the past. What if he tried to mess things up and make them different? The simple answer is he couldn't. This is kind of shown when future Harry tries to take Peter at the beginning of the night. He tries, but he doesn't change anything since Hermione stopped him. Same thing would happen if Harry tried to kill his past self. He would not be able to do it because he obviously wasn't killed when he was his past self. If Harry really tried to kill himself, the wand would malfunction, or he would trip and miss wildly, or a bird would get in the way of the curse, or whatever you might think of. It doesn't really matter, but something would always stop him from changing the past. The concept of free will is difficult to determine in this, but I personally find it hard to believe that free will would override history. This is the most debatable part, but I think that this odd form of fate is the simplest explanation. And the simplest explanation usually is the best one. So why on earth would the time turner be useful if you can't even change the past with it? I mean, that's what most people would want to use time travel for. Actually, the use of the time turner is to make yourself be in two places at once. It's kind of like making a temporary clone of yourself. Let's say you have a lot of homework to do, but not all the time in the world to get it done. With the time turner, you can work on two different pieces of homework instead of one without losing any time. Yeah, that's precisely what Hermione did all year. The other use is also something that happens in Harry Potter. If you can effectively make a clone of yourself, then it would be really helpful to have an extra Harry helping him accomplish his goals. When Harry first experiences the night, you realize that one Harry alone was not enough to prevent Sirius's capture and eventual death by soul-sucking. A second Harry can continue saving Sirius when the first Harry is incapacitated, and it also provides the first Harry with a great alibi for when people are trying to get him in trouble, like Snape. Now, there's one more thing I want to talk about, and it involves the new book/play, The Cursed Child. For those of you who haven't seen it or read it, please skip to this time code. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, they're gone. The Cursed Child relies heavily on the concept of the time turner altering the past, and thus the future. This seemingly undoes everything I said about the time turner up to this point. However, if you say that the time travel in The Cursed Child causes a paradox, I would 100% agree with you. Firstly, this time turner uses an entirely different type of time travel than I was just explaining. Remember when I mentioned the timeline branching off of itself? That's what the time turner in The Cursed Child does. Or tries to do and doesn't do. The problem is that when the timeline is altered to go to point C here, it seems that the timeline to point B stops existing. This is a problem because a single timeline can't be altered. In this example, it causes a grandfather paradox, wherein Albus changes the past to a timeline where his father gets killed, and thus he's never born, so there's no Albus to change the event in the first place. This could have worked if it was a splitting timeline, otherwise known as multiverse theory. In this, both timelines exist side by side, and nothing actually changes from the original. This way, when Albus changes the past, he and Scorpius would end up in point C together, because point B, where Albus is born, is still intact, just in another universe. Long story short, because of the fact that the Cursed Child had Albus be unborn, it makes it a paradox. I'll go more into my opinion of its execution in my review of the Cursed Child that I'm hoping to complete soon. That was a long explanation, but hopefully now you know a little bit more about time travel, and you see why all those videos are wrong for saying Harry Potter messed up for getting time travel wrong. It was never wrong for this reason. The time travel was sound, and it makes perfect sense why they couldn't just solve all their problems with a flip of a time turner. That being said, I'm not mad at the people who are criticizing Harry Potter time travel for the wrong reasons. Nah, I'm actually more mad at that most people haven't realized that there's a real paradox that comes from the time turner that has nothing to do with the problems that people have been complaining about. That's right, after all this time defending the time turner, it isn't 100% plot hole proof. Look forward to a relatively less complex part 2 explaining what's wrong with the time turner. Subscribe if you'd like to see right away when it's made, and if you're from the future, you can click the annotation linking to part 2. If you disagree with my theory or have more to add to the discussion or have any cool ideas for Harry Potter discussion videos in the future, leave me a comment. I'd love to see any opinions or ideas that you might have. And of course, thanks for watching. Nox.